Welcome to Chewing the Fat, a WorkForge podcast, your source for bite-sized conversations about the world of food manufacturing staffing, retention, onboarding, training, and career development, featuring operators, industry leaders, and more.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nathan Walts. I am CEO of WorkForge, and we're really excited for this installment of our podcast, Chewing the Fat. And today, we'll be discussing upskilling as a win-win for the organization and the employee. We're fortunate enough today to be joined by David Adams, who is a senior advisor with the Boston Consulting Group and managing partner at Adams Advisors. He advises on education, upskilling, and workforce development. He's also a really valued partner and subject matter expert for WorkForge. David's illustrious career includes serving as the commissioner of the Department of Workforce Development for Indiana. Before that, he was the first chief innovation officer at the University of Cincinnati, where he spearheaded the Cincinnati Innovation District, which became the model for Ohio's economic development strategies. David was a founding member of the leadership team at I2, helping them grow from $4 million to $1.1 billion in revenue in just 7 years. David's also a member of multiple boards. He's been a guest on CNBC, has publications in the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, and Forbes. And David, we're just really excited to have you on our forum today. So thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, it's good to be with you.
Great. Well, we'll go ahead and dive right in here and start with our first question. So why has upskilling become such an important topic?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We're in an extremely tight labor market. In fact, if you look at our unemployment as a nation, it's at 3.9%. Any economist will tell you that, you know, anything below 5% is full employment. And so we've been at this now for 18 consecutive months. So it's a very tight labor market. Organizations of all sizes are having a hard time, you know, attracting talent, but as importantly, retaining talent is becoming a big issue. So you've got that piece of it, that we're in a tight labor market. I would tell you that the other component that is, you know, with us all is that there's a lot of transformation and shifting happening in our economy. So, you know, think about digital transformation. You think about the introduction of Gen AI in the last, 18 months or so. We've got Industry 4.0, Industry 5.0. So organizations' ability to continue to upskill and reskill individuals becomes critically important. What we're starting to see, though, is progressive companies are starting to understand that they've got to take responsibility for upskilling their existing workforce to meet the needs of their business, meet the needs from a revenue standpoint, from a growth standpoint, productivity and efficiency. So, you know, all these factors are combined are really placing a strong emphasis on upskilling of individuals within these organizations.
Great. Thank you for that. So kind of building upon that, what are some of the challenges individuals and companies face when considering, you know, which skills are the most important skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, let's take this with two different segments. Let's talk about companies first. If you think about, you know, organizations, manufacturing companies, think people that make things, they've got a really strong understanding of forecast in terms of what future customer demand is going to be. They've also got very strong relationships with suppliers. They understand what materials are going to be needed in order to make the products. They know when planned maintenance is going to have to occur on a machine. But when it comes to human capital, there's really a lot less understood. Know of numerous examples of, you know, might understand my current needs, but if I were to try to forecast out 6 or 12 months from now in terms of what I need, don't really have a strong definition. So corporations are struggling because they know talent is key to them doing what they need to accomplish, but yet having a clear definition of what that talent is in terms of knowledge, skills, and abilities is not readily available, you know, for an individual, for an organization. So that's one challenge that an organization has. And from an individual standpoint, you know, if you think about how companies traditionally have placed jobs as they post a position with the necessary skills, knowledge, degrees, whatever it may be. And if an individual feels that they don't have what's necessary in order to apply for that job, they just don't. And therefore, the company, this individual might have the base skills needed. They just need to be upskilled, won't even apply. So the company misses out on that opportunity. You know, also, as we talked about a little bit earlier, in this full employment economy that we're in, this tight labor market, the folks that corporations are recruiting are already employed. And it's difficult for them to say, I'm going to go get this new skill or get this certification or credential or whatever it may be, if in fact I don't know that it's going to actually result in a future job or an increase in wages. So we've kind of created this dichotomy where, corporation needs or organizations needs, especially in manufacturing, as you go into the marketplace, you're not finding what you need. The people may be there, but may not have the right skills. So that creates a challenge for the individuals seeking employment. It also creates a challenge for the organizations trying to define what is it exactly that I need. So again, we're starting to see organizations look inside the four walls of their business to say, how can I really start to understand where the gaps are? And then how do I upskill my existing organization to help meet those gaps? And then hopefully I'll fill some of the mid to high skilled jobs. Some of those lower skilled jobs will be a little bit easier to find.
Sure. And kind of building off a little bit around, some of our experiences, of course, employers are on the hook for really a lot of the work, to sort of shrink the skills gap or to, potentially sort of offer new skills to new employees to do the job. And there's obviously been a lot of talk in the last really kind of 18 months around some of the shifts around credentials and maybe sort of the college degrees and and other types of credentials and certifications and badges and skills. What do you think are some of the big challenges for employers as they think about how to balance in this really, really tight labor market around the idea of skills and other types of education-based credentials?
I think we've done a really nice job as an industry of confusing both individuals and employers about what's needed. We talk about degrees versus non-degrees, certifications versus non-certifications or micro-credentials. We are on a journey where collectively we're all going to have to continue to learn. And the mechanisms for learning may take very different avenues. It might require a degree, it might require a credential, it might actually require just training that I have to do on the job to get to the next level. But one of the big gaps, if you get past just the noise of degrees versus credentials and all that, is companies haven't necessarily articulated what are the knowledge, skills, and ability needed for a specific role. So as an individual, it's hard for me to know what I might do to advance myself if I don't know exactly what it is the company's looking for. And, there are a lot of programs out there that companies offer through the HR department, such as, continuing education. But it's not focused on continuing education necessarily to what's going to be of benefit to the individual and to the company. And, when we think about skilling's been one of these general terms, but not a lot of emphasis has been focused on what is the value to the organization. So in other words, not all jobs are created equal. And so are there certain skills that are needed that organizations, if we train, could accelerate the development of the individual, which as a company, again, would make me more productive, might help me grow. But those are major gaps typically inside organizations that they haven't clearly articulated for each of the roles. What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities? And then how do individuals actually obtain those things to advance their careers in whatever form or fashion? So those are just major gaps that need to be overcome. But there clearly are organizations like yours that are working aggressively to help fill that skilling gap, to help companies accelerate what they need to do in order to increase their profits and, and again, help them grow as an organization.
Right. And I think you're hitting on a really key point, which is the idea of learning and development being an investment, right? And, in some cases, could be a complex investment. It's sort of interesting. I was at a leading workforce development conference out on the East Coast last year. We got a chance to tour Amazon HQ 2 out in the DC area, and spent a little bit of time on their learning and development efforts. And just a few of the things that I kind of picked up on was, number one, the commitment to championing a learning and development program within, this complex ecosystem that is what Amazon's doing. The idea of, how do I bestow new skills on my employee base? How do I make that readily available to them? How do I make that on demand so that people can, constantly, kind of pursue this continuous improvement, culture and approach and learning approach that, ultimately, Amazon and the variety of jobs that they hire for and sustain, will benefit from. In your experiences or just work, have you seen any other organizations that seem to be kind of spearheading, learning and development programs?
Yeah, I was, recently at a place where the learning development executive for Walmart, which has about 2.1 million associates, and their big issue is not just attraction because they want to grow their organization, but you can imagine, retention becomes a really important component. And so one of the things this individual talked about was, whether you're an associate in a store, an engineer, a pilot working for Walmart, they have clearly defined the roles. And for each of those roles, what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed, and how might you go about obtaining those, whether it's inside the four walls of the organization with a third-party partner that they may have. But every individual in that organization has a clear understanding of what it takes to advance their career. And candidly, if that individual is happy where they're at, there's not a penalty associated with that. But you think about from a career development standpoint, if I'm somebody who wants to advance my career, traditionally organizations have had not good mechanisms to do that. You have to wait for a position to come open, or you might be doing something good on a project and get promoted. Imagine being part of an organization where the role ahead of you, or the one you might want to advance to, can clearly define what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to attain, and you take it upon yourself with the organization to obtain those skills. You get that job. One, it's better for you, but it's also better for the organization, because now you're creating career pathways where there's a good reason why I would want to stay within your organization as a key retention tool. And then Nathan, if we couple this with what we've been talking about, that we're in this tight labor market, and this is going to continue on for some time, my ability to not just attract, but more importantly, my ability to recruit and retain those individuals, or better said, to retain and retrain those individuals, is going to be my competitive advantage. And so organizations are really going to have to pay a lot of attention to the talent aspects, not dissimilar to the attention they've paid to, in terms of the products and the equipment that they maintain on a daily basis.
Yeah. So in many ways, it's sort of embracing the idea that, as an employer, just like you would invest, capital dollars into equipment, for your next round of product or updates to make your next round of product, you have to think of learning and development, the development of people, really kind of in a similar way, that it's an investment that ultimately will yield you, anything from higher productivity, faster time to productivity, higher levels of quality, but the same kind of investments that organizations are making, on the equipment side of things, they got to make in people. Kind of what you're getting at.
Well, and you're spot on. I mean, unlike equipment or unlike buildings that, are not going to run out the door, people have choices. And so talent can work wherever it wants. And so creating these opportunities where you can actually create development opportunities. And I think you hit on a key point that drives value for the organization. So we're not just skilling for skilling's sake, right? What we're doing as an organization is we're trying to understand our organizational objectives, growth, profitability, productivity. And right alongside that is we're understanding what is the labor needs going to be in order to support that. And then do I have everything I need to support that? And if not, how am I going to develop that first? And then potentially look to the outside to figure out, is there an opportunity for me to recruit certain individuals in this organization that I can maintain and keep on a long-term basis? So it really needs to be a parallel path to every strategic conversation in terms of where the business is going financially. What is the labor corresponding to that, and how's it going to be developed to actually actualize what the company's trying to do?
That's great. So shifting gears just a little bit, obviously we've been hearing a lot about artificial intelligence really over the last 12, 18 months, and really accelerated here in the last 9 months. From your seat, what role can AI play in learning and upskilling a workforce?
Well, I think it's going to be significant, and I think we're still in the early days. But if you think about how education training has traditionally been done, it's a one-size-fits-all model. It really doesn't reflect on me as an individual. And I think the one real power that Gen AI is going to lend to upskilling is it's going to be able to look at me as an individual and actually put together a training program that's going to be based on my competencies and help accelerate me. So if I'm a high learner, then it's going to start me at a certain place and accelerate that learning. If I'm somebody that's not quite getting the concepts maybe as quickly as someone else, it'll break that down and work to help me understand it in terms that I can understand and advance my learning. So I think the individuality of this technology in terms of its dramatic impact on upskilling is going to be tremendous. for organizations that adopt this. Again, this has got to be adopted in a much larger framework from a strategic talent management, but it is absolutely going to really impact our ability to actually reach individuals where they are at and help them on an individual basis.
And kind of building off that a little bit, there's obviously a little bit of a fear factor around artificial intelligence, maybe less so from the employer side, but certainly from the employee side. Have you seen or any thoughts around maybe how we mitigate some of that fear factor that might be out there around adoption of artificial intelligence, with the idea of replacing employees?
Well, I think anytime we have something new, and I just think this is our human nature, there's a fear of the unknown. And so, I would strongly suggest, people, I play with it every day. I use it for all kinds of aspects. And I think the more you get to know it and its opportunities, I see it as a productivity enhancement tool, not necessarily a person replacement, but I think there's so many opportunities, whether it's customer service, whether it's skilling, whether it's using it to help get me to solving certain pieces of large problems. I think it's well suited for, but I think that requires, organizations and individuals to actually engage the technology. And I think all of this is going to be, very evolutionary in nature, just like we're talking about with skilling. I think, the important part here is it can help me from an individual standpoint, based on where I'm at, actually obtain the skills in a meaningful way, as opposed to one size fits all. But it's like anything else, you just got to get in and work with it. I don't see it as this, technology that, somehow is going to replace, everything we do. I see it as truly a productivity enhancement tool, but we have to all, engage with it and determine how best to use it. It's like anything else. It's new.
Agreed. So how can upskilling be a win-win for the company and the employee?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So one is, and if I could just back up for a moment in terms of just trying to think about this from an organizational standpoint. I mean, one, I think companies have got to have the ability from a step standpoint to really inventory the talent that they have and really start to think about this in terms of the roles, the responsibilities that they have. And then I think once they understand what they have, they really got to take a look and say, okay, from a strategic standpoint of what I'm trying to do as a business, what are the skills, knowledge, and capabilities that I need, and where are the gaps? And then from that, how are you going to manage the talent inside the organization in order to accomplish that? So, how do you take somebody who may be in a mid-skilled job and you really need a high-skilled job? How do you help that individual get the skills so they can take on that position? So that's a win for the organization because you're doing a couple things. One, you're clearly articulating what's necessary, and you're going to increase the speed at which individuals can come into your organization and be productive, or people who are already in the organization, how you can increase their productivity, which is going to actually be a benefit to the company. From an individual standpoint, you're actually giving me an opportunity to understand what the career pathways for me are within your organization. And you think about it, most organizations don't do that today. We hire you, we bring you in, and you're kind of in this job, and if something opens up, we might move you forward. But if I could be part of an organization where you're actually taking a genuine interest in helping me to advance my skills, advance my knowledge, and candidly advance my wages, these are really, really good things. And so in this market that we're in, which we will continue to be in, it truly becomes a retention tool for organizations, because you now are going to create an environment where an individual who comes to be a part of your organization or somebody that's in the organization has a clear understanding of what it's going to take to get to the next level and what they have to do to make that happen. From a corporation standpoint, they've got to make the investments in that individual, no different than they make the investments in maintaining equipment or facilities or whatever else might be. But the value is they're going to have a dedicated workforce that's going to come and want to be a part of that organization. So the win-win here is that you're really creating an environment from a talent management standpoint of a place where people want to be, because they can absolutely see how they can move from one point to the next. And from an organization standpoint, you're actually going to build a workforce that's going to help you meet your strategic objectives. I would also contend very strongly, Nathan, this is going to be, for the organizations that adopt this, it's going to be a competitive differentiator in terms of, one, retention of talent, but as importantly, as they go out to attract talent that may be at another business, it's going to be a competitive advantage for them to recruit that talent because, again, individuals can then see there's a pathway for them to advance their careers. This isn't all about money. Money is important, but individuals typically, once they learn a certain job, want to kind of figure out what the next opportunity can be. And I truly believe that organizations that adopt this philosophy and put this to practice are going to have something that really differentiates them moving forward. And candidly, for the ones who don't, they're going to struggle to attract talent. They're going to struggle to retain talent. And if you think about the cost of training and the cost of retention, and you're not going to be able to hit your profitability goals and things of that nature because you're not going to have the people. And I know of organizations today, top 100, Fortune 100 companies who are trying to work through this, but currently are having difficulties finding the talent to meet the CEO's strategic objective. So you think about that for a minute. We all lay out strategies as organizations in terms of what we want to do, but it requires people to do it. And if we don't have the people there, it doesn't work. So firmly believe this is not a strategy. It's the strategy that has to be adopted and is going to be with us for a long time.
Yeah, it's great commentary. And, it dovetails into a lot of what we see firsthand, with manufacturers and food manufacturers in particular, of different sizes. I think you hit on a really key point, which is strategic objective. If you're sort of not really committing resources, whether it's people or whether it's an investment in tools or whether it's a cultural component, if there is not some kind of sort of 360-degree intentionality behind that investment, and there's some executive sponsorship, then what we've seen those kind of programs kind of flounder and not really have the kind of impact. So, just kind of building upon this idea that if you're, in particular, a manufacturing organization, food and beverage manufacturing organization where we play, it's extremely important that it falls under executive sponsorship. There's a strategic objective. There's resources aligned to it. There's tools that are going to allow the team to be successful, especially as you think about how many different types of employees and roles and jobs, they have to consider to make this kind of program successful.
Well, I totally agree with you. And we've lived in an environment for many, many decades where, the availability of talent was more of a commodity. And so, companies didn't necessarily have to give it the degree of consideration that we do today. I mean, we're in a highly competitive talent marketplace. And I always say talent has choices. And so competitively, are you creating an environment here that, one, attracts the talent you want, but to me, probably more importantly, retains the talent that you have? Because if you're going to meet the objectives, just as you talked about it, you've got to have the talent to be able to do that. And your ability as an organization to be able to help clearly articulate and define what it takes for individuals to continue to learn and adapt and adjust to your needs as a strategic, partner with you in your mission of what you're trying to accomplish, it's just critically important. I can't underestimate, the importance of this whole talent development strategy. And I think you're spot on, Nathan. It has to come from the top. Organizations really need to understand that talent is their most valuable resource. And in this, again, tight labor market, you really got to focus on upskilling of the existing workforce to meet your needs.
Yep, and that's a great place to wrap up. So, David, thanks so much for taking time with us today to share some of your experiences and what you're seeing in the market.
Well, I enjoyed chewing the fat with you very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'd like to thank our listeners. And until next time, keep forging ahead.
Thank you for joining this episode of Chewing the Fat, a WorkForge podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Visit workforge.com to learn more and sign up for more food manufacturing resources at workforge.com/blog.